So, this is going to be content covering assignment 2, and what we'll be covering today is going to be selections, transform tools, brushes, and the clone tool. So we'll get started. I'm going to start right off by going into Bridge and select an image here. I got an image right here I'm going to use. So looking at this image here, first thing that I usually do when I come into an image like this is go in and see how good of a quality this image is. At 100%, this is our image here. So say for instance we're trying to sell a client a house, or sell this house before it's built. So we could do some cleanup to this. Some of the distracting features in this object might be the cars, the ladder, a couple of these boards here, the house in the background, the wires over here, things like that that we can take out. So let's talk a little bit about selections and how to select objects and get rid of them. All of what we're going to be doing today is going to be a destructive method of selecting objects. It's more of a permanent type of selection that you do here. So, so to start off with, I want to select the sky up here. I'd like to get rid of the sky and add something else in there. Even though the sky looks okay, you know, there's several different ways to select it, but I'm going to choose up here either quick selection or magic wand. Magic wand works on fields of color, whereas quick selection works on contrast between colors or a definite change in pixel color. So I'm going to go ahead and pick the magic wand first, and first thing I'm going to come up here in my options is make sure that I have my point sample, my sample size set to a 3x3 average. That will let Photoshop analyze where I pick. It will create a 3x3 average sample around that pixel, and then based on this tolerance setting, it will select colors until it reaches a color that is outside of this range, outside of 16 pixels in depth. So when I go ahead and click on my screen like this, you can see how it selects one area here. It selects this blue area, and when it comes to something like this white cloud or the edge of this building, it stops. So I want to continue to select, so I want to make sure that my selection method is set to add to selection, so that way I can add to this selection. So for instance, I want to include this cloud, so I'll click here inside the cloud. You can see it selects more things. Okay, now I can see something that's going wrong here, and this may happen to you. You can see here I've selected the white in the cloud, and now it's selected all the white on this building. And down in here you can see marching ants. So the reason for that is up here this contiguous button is not checked off. So what this means is if it's unchecked, it's going to look for white pixels. When I selected this white pixel, it's going to look in the entire image. It doesn't matter if there's an edge. It's going to select every single white pixel in the image. Let's see what happens when we change this to contiguous. So I'm going to hold down Command or Control and D to deselect my selection. This time I'll turn on contiguous, and I'll go ahead and select. Okay, and we get the same selection as we did before, but notice this time when I pick on my white area, it's going to stop right there. It doesn't select anything else. It's basically analyzing this and going till it finds a stopping point. So I can continue to select like this. And even these small little areas here, I can kind of keep selecting like this. You can see the more I select, okay? So you can see this is a little bit more cumbersome. And the reason that I have to do so many picks on this is because, number one, my tolerance is set fairly low. And number two, we're trying to pick something that's blue and white, so we have two kind of things going on. And remember, the magic wand works on color for the most part. So one thing that we could do is I'll do a Command D or Control D and deselect that selection again. I would increase my tolerance up to say 32 and see how that works. So I'll go ahead and pick one more time. And this time you can see how it comes down a little bit further than it did before. I'll go ahead and pick white again, and you can see when I do that second click, it basically picked all those areas. And then when I do that again, notice down here it's selecting this white because I picked this color right here that's fairly a grayish kind of white, and it didn't have anything else to look at, and it kind of went down and said, oh, this is the same kind of color gray here, so pick that too. So that could become a problem. So in this case here, I can tell that Magic Wand isn't really the best method, so I'm going to go up here and do Quick Selection Tool instead. Now the Quick Selection Tool, instead of having a cursor, you can see here on our screen we have a circle with a plus in the middle of it. This is our paintbrush tool, and up here on the options bar you can see here we have new selection, add to selection, and subtract from selection, and then the brush size right here. If I click this down, you can see here we can change our brush size to be larger. When I move my cursor on my screen, you can see I get this nice large brush. When I bring it down here, I get a smaller brush. Then you have the hardness. Right now we have a fairly hard brush. If we want a soft brush, you can't see it on the screen, but up here in our preview you can see it's kind of fuzzy around the edges, and we'll look at the reason to use hardness and softness later. Spacing and angle and all this sort of stuff we'll get into later as well. For right now, just really worry about the size because when you're using quick selection will build its accuracy based on how large or small your brush is when it's picking. So when I click and drag, for instance, like this, I'm going to just click and hold down my left mouse button and drag like this. It's analyzing these areas. Okay, so now I clicked and dragged and like this, and you can see that it just started going ahead and doing this here, and it didn't do a very good selection for us. So I'm going to go Control D, Command D to get out of that, and I'll come up here, and as I pick again, you can see it's just not doing a great job for us here. So as you can see, not all the magic stuff works great, but I'll show you a few tricks to help you fix this problem. So I'm just going to go ahead and do a real quick selection like that. And you can see here we have pretty much all of the sky selected all the way around. And we have some mistakes here in our house, which is fairly easy to fix. So I'm going to come up here and go to Subtract now. And you can see here that my cursor now has a subtraction symbol in the middle of this. And I'm going to make my brush size a little bit smaller, because if I'm picking in here, you can see it would be very hard to kind of pick in this area. So on our keyboard, above the return key are your bracket keys, your left and right bracket key. So the left bracket key will make your brush smaller by selecting that, and your right bracket key will make it larger. Okay, so clicking the key to make it smaller. I could do the same thing up here, come up and make this size smaller, but it's much easier to use the keyboard shortcut. So I'll just come in here now and subtract out these areas like that, and I'll just kind of come down like this and try to subtract this stuff out. And basically Photoshop gets more intelligent as you do this. The more that you do this within this selection, the more intelligent it will get. It'll try to figure out what you're trying to select, and eventually it'll kind of click and you'll kind of see it fix itself. So we can kind of do this sort of thing here and come up and, you know, just kind of subtract out this stuff. And and kind of do that sort of thing. And we want to get rid of that stuff there. Okay, so you can see there are still a few little edges up here that will cause a little bit of a problem. Okay, so we can do all that sort of stuff right there. Let's zoom up and look at, I'm going to click on the zoom tool and we're going to zoom up to this corner up here. And I'm going to use my space bar and pan over a little bit. So you can see kind of how ratty looking this kind of selection is. Okay, it's kind of jaggy over here. I got a little piece here that's still not selected right, and all this. And one of the reasons for that is this image really doesn't have great resolution itself. So you can see here how the pixelization between the sky and the edge of this roof would tend to cause a problem. There's, you know, some similar types of colors in here. So up here we got a lot of fringing between this blue and this kind of purplish color and the brown, all kind of blending in together. So, you know, so what can we do about this? For this particular image, and you're going to find as you do this, some images will work better than others. So let's just look at another example here. I'm going to pull up another house here. Let's pick this one for example and look at this. Now this one's a kind of a nice candidate because you have a really nice solid field of sky, which is one common thing. And one of the nice things that we can do in Photoshop is change the sky and give it a nice blue sky and puffy clouds, which, you know, appeals to people instead of this kind of blah kind of background. So the only challenge we're going to have here is the trees down in here. So so what I'm going to do first here is Magic Wand would be a great candidate for this. So we'll come in here and select the Magic Wand tool. I'm going to make sure contiguous is turned on. My tolerance is set to 32 and I'll give it one good click. And you can see how it finds all those pixels really quickly like this. Found all that stuff with the exception of the trees down here. So so right now you can see how nicely that selected that, and this did a much better job. And if I zoom up to that, you can see it even got this little corner around here. And again, this has to do with the image quality and the differences between the colors here. So you can kind of see all that as you're kind of looking around this. You can see it did a really nice job for the most part. If we go in here and look at, say, another image, let's do this one here. And we'll pull this one up. And we'll come in here, and this time we'll do quick selection. And I'll make my brush a little bit larger and add to selection, and I'll just kind of go and drag like this. See how quickly it did that, okay? And it has a nice field of black and white here. So it has a really good contrast. So it shouldn't have those real problems like we had on that other image. So, you know, what do we do on that other image, you know, to get a nice selection? Well, you saw what I went through to actually do the Magic Wand and the quick selection tool there, and what I went through and how long that took. So I'm going to deselect this by Command D, Control D, okay? And I say both because I'm using a Mac. So on a Mac it's Command D, and on a PC it's Control D. So okay, so what I would do in this case here is, instead of using one of these automated selection routines, I would just come in with the polygonal lasso tool and zoom up to my image like this, because this is a little bit of a lower resolution image. So it might be a little bit more beneficial to just come in here and click, because we have these nice straight lines. It makes it real easy to come in here and just kind of click like this and do this sort of clicking. And as I move my cursor up towards the screen, you can see how it automatically pans. I don't have to pan on using the space bar or anything like that, because it'll just automatically pan as I kind of draw it over and up like this. So I'm just going to click, click. Now this seems like it may take longer, but you know, think about the time that we just spent using the magic wand tool, the quick selection tool, and finding out we just didn't have a good selection. So we wasted a bunch of time. So it's really kind of good to know when to use one selection tool versus the other. And in actuality here, it's not really going to take any longer. It just seems, because we're doing it manually, it seems like it, is a little bit more time consuming. So anyway, so I'll go ahead and pick these last few remaining points here, and we'll almost finish this up here. I'm going to take everything right down here to the ground, and I'll just kind of follow this ground over like this. I want to get rid of this house too. I'm going to keep the dirt. So now I'm going to come outside the boundary up here to finish this off. We're going to come all the way up to the top. I'm going to click, someplace up here. I'll come over here and come all the way back over. Image is pretty big when you're zoomed up. And we'll come down. And let's see, I started over here, so I'm going to come down to about I'm going to get rid of the trees too. We'll just kind of come in here and just get rid of this grass. And we'll come down and close it off. You can see when I come down to the very beginning, see how the cursor changes there? It has that little circle next to it indicating you're going to close your selection. Okay, so we'll zoom back out to full screen, and now we have this nice selection. I'm going to duplicate my background by right-clicking on it and duplicate the background and turn off the background layer. Now with this selected, I'll hit the delete key, and that removes that background just like that. So Control D and deselect that. And now I'm ready to go ahead and put in my new background. So we'll go out to Bridge, and I'm going to go down here on my stock disk into Stock Skies and find a nice background, like this with some nice clouds. In this case here, we want some background because remember we removed some of that background. So you can see in here I don't have a lot of sky images. So one other place to look is under landscape. So landscape, we could have this image, for instance, with some nice clouds in there. We got a tree and some background. We may want, I don't want to put it into some kind of surreal landscape like that. I'd like it to be more realistic, because this is going to be for an advertisement or something that a real estate agent might use. Now this may or may not work because the trees may not be the right scale for the image. We want something kind of smaller. That one has a nice field of blue, but I'd like some clouds. So you can kind of just look. You're not always going to find the perfect image. Let's see. This one even might work because we could probably hide the highway behind the house, but let's just pick this one and we'll try this. Open this up in Photoshop. And I'll use my move tool, and we're going to click and hold onto this image, and we're going to drag up to this one and drag down and release, and you can see we get our clouds. Now this image is pretty large compared to the other image, so we'll have to zoom out a little bit. So we'll zoom out like this, and with the move tool, having transform controls on, you can see how big this image actually is. So we can size it by clicking a handle, holding shift, and dragging it down like this. Okay, accept that, and let's move it behind in the layer stack over here to the right. Drag it down below the background copy so that it's in the background. So now let's look at this full screen like this. So now we have a nice background here. Let's move it up a little bit so that we have some of the grass in the background there. So, and maybe even some of that tree. Okay, so you can kind of see that behind there. So, yeah, that might work. Okay. So, we have this transition that's going between the grass and the dirt, but we can hide that later if we want, or blend it in, and I can show you how to do that. So that's the first step right there, is to get rid of the background. Next thing that we want to introduce you to is getting rid of these cars in here, the back of this GMC and this car here. So how can we do something like that? Well, we have something called the clone stamp tool, which is I think it's probably one of the first tools that I learned and really enjoyed, because it takes a copy from one area of your image and copies it exactly as a duplicate someplace else in your image. So, for instance, if I want to get rid of the back of this truck, I could sample over here from this dirt, or over here from the edge of the road, and just fill in this spot over here. So let's see how this works. Now, in order for this to work the best way, I'm going to create a layer above my background copy, okay, a new blank layer, and I'm going to call this my cloning, okay, and I'm going to come over here to the clone stamp tool over to the left, and there's lots of options for the clone stamp tool up here. You can see first off is the brush size. Then we have some settings up here. This toggles the brush panel. This toggles the clone source panel, the opacity, flow, align, sample, all this sort of stuff. Don't worry about it too much right now. We'll click on things as we need them. For right now, I want to make sure that this button right now is set to current and below, okay? So this is sampling the current layer, which is this layer, cloning, nothing on it, and below. So it's sampling everything else below it as well. So one thing that could get in the way here by doing that is this background image, this layer 1, okay? Because that's in there as well. So what I'm going to do is basically just turn that off for a second, so that's not going to be included. So we'll come over here to our clone stamp tool, and I'm going to come down on the brush palette, and I'm going to select a soft brush. Okay, you can see how this has a soft kind of edge to it versus a hard brush. It's best to clone with a soft brush because it will give you a nice transition between the two, and I'll demonstrate both so that way you can understand the difference between a soft brush and a hard brush. So right now our brush is fairly large. You can see it on our screen right here. I'm going to make it a little bit smaller, and I'll first off set my clone source. Okay, this is where I'm going to be cloning from. So I'm going to hold down the Alt key on my keyboard, and when I do hold down the Alt key, notice that my cursor changes to this target symbol. So what I want to do is target right here between the edge of this concrete and the ground here, and I'm going to put it right here in the middle of that. And when I release my mouse, notice that my cursor has that image kind of imposed in there, and you can see how it's not hard around the edge, it's kind of soft. So I'm going to just bring that over here, and I'm going to match it in down here in the bottom, right about there, and then I'm just going to kind of click and drag this over like this, and you can see it's basically cloning. Okay, now notice also where I cloned from. It's very hard to see. I'll highlight it in the video, but you can see a little plus symbol going back and forth there, and as I bring my cursor up, you can see it come up into here, and it's going to come up and it's going to clone everything, including that lumber that's over there, and we just voila, get rid of that just like that. Now I can tell that this lumber is the same as this lumber, and I want to get rid of this, so I'm just going to sample from over here in this dirt area. Again, I'll just resample by holding down the Alt key, clicking right here, and just coming over here and painting again some of that stuff out of there. So to you and I, just looking at this now, we really can't tell that this came from here, other than that this object right here, okay, is the same as that object right there. But someone looking at this from the very beginning is not going to know that. So let's get rid of the car next. This time, instead of using a soft brush, let's use a hard brush so that you can see the difference. And this time I'll sample again from right here, okay, right in the middle of this. And I'm going to line it up right over here. Now notice that my preview this time, see how different my preview looks? See how it's hard right against the brush? So what that's going to do for us here is it's going to create this real hard looking image. You can see right now, see how we have these hard edges going in here? So we don't get this nice soft transition that we did get before. So that's one of the reasons why you're going to use a soft brush. So we'll go back to the clone stamp tool and switch this back to a soft brush, and we'll reinitiate our source right here. I'm holding down the Alt key and clicking again, and I'll just come over here and line up my pavement and just kind of come back in here and just get rid of this car here. Okay. All right. Very nice. Okay. So we're getting rid of all that. Okay. So I want some of this crushed rock down in here as well. That's probably actually going there. So I'm going to make my brush a little bit smaller. I'm going to hold down Alt right here, and we'll just kind of pick and just kind of put some of that in there like that. And I'll hold down Alt again and pick here. So you'll have to keep resourcing it, because if you don't, you'll go over the same spot again. So, you know, you don't want to keep cloning the same stuff. And you don't want to try to get anything repeating like I did here. You can see we got this board here and the same board right there. So I'm going to hold down the Alt key and just get rid of that one. Okay. So that looks good enough for me right now. Okay. So that's how we can get rid of some of that stuff. I could get rid of these as well, these poles sticking up here. So I'll just hold down the Alt key and just kind of pick and drag up like that. I'll pick again here and drag up to about there. And this time we'll zoom up to this a little bit so I can see what I'm doing, and use the pan tool. Now this time I want to get this Tyvek going across here. I got a shadow right here, but that's okay. We're going to just go ahead and make my brush a little bit smaller. I'm going to source right from here, and I'll bring that over right to about there. And then I'm going to drag down to get that little bit of concrete in there. And that's good enough. Okay. And I'll do the same thing right here. Okay. We're going to get right there and get that out of there. Get that Tyvek out of there. Now you can see I want to get this out of there too. So I'm going to hold down the Alt key, and we'll try maybe right here and try to pick some of that stuff up. And lastly, we have up underneath here, so I'll hold down the Alt key again, and I'm going to source right from here over to about here and line up that edge of that window. Okay, right about there. Beautiful. Okay. And we'll come down here and hold down the Alt key again, and this time we'll put that back in here like this, and just come down and get rid of that. Beautiful. So there you go. We showed you how to do a little bit of cloning. Cloning can be complicated from time to time, but and there's a lot more to it. You can clone at different angles, and you can mirror clone, and you can do all that sort of stuff. But for right now, that's what we've done. Now, the reason I put this on its own layer is because it doesn't destroy the stuff on this layer. I can turn this layer off. Now you can see we can get back those. If we just look at this layer, the cloning layer, that's all we have on the cloning layer. All this stuff is laying on top of this background copy right here. And it just blends in nicely, and you can't see any transition there. So we'll turn our background back on. Lastly, you know, if I wanted a real challenge here, which it would be a challenge, to get this ladder out. So if I zoom up to that ladder, okay, in architectural Photoshop type of work, it's something you want to try to use one element that's common between things in your image. For instance, we have this window here, which is very similar to this window here. The only difference is that this window here is open a little bit. You can see the shadow down here. This window here is in shadow because it has an overhang on it. Okay, so we could use part of this window over here to get rid of that, and we could try to maybe clone this whole thing and just kind of put it over here, and see what happens to try to get rid of that ladder. Sometimes instead of cloning, what you can do is this. I'm going to show you guys how we can take and using our polygonal lasso tool make a copy of this. So what I'll do here is just kind of come around this and make a selection around this down at the bottom. We'll come across and kind of come up like this. Come up like this. And up to about there. To there, across, and back to there. So now that I have this as a selection, I can come up here to Layer, and I can say New Layer via Copy. And what this will do is it'll create a new layer based on what I have selected and put it on its own layer. It'll make a copy of it, put it on its own layer. So there it is right there. Then I'll just use the Move tool to actually move that. Oops, messed up. What ended up happening there was I ended up doing that from this layer here. Let's back up and kind of look at that for a second. I'll come back up here to my polygonal lasso tool. So right now, this selection is on this layer. So there's nothing here except for what we've cloned. I actually want the copy to come from this layer. Okay, so I want to make sure that I have that selected. So it's good that you saw that mistake being made. So I can come up here now, back to Layer, New Layer via Copy. Okay, so now I have that copy again. We'll use the Move tool and I'll have an exact copy of this. And I can just kind of move it over and put it into place. The only problem with what I'm doing here right now is the shadows on this, but probably most people won't even know. But so for right now, the other thing is that the scale of this is a little bit off, okay, because of the perspective distortion. Okay, so what we can do is move it into position roughly, okay, and what I'm going to do is use these two common corners, this corner here and this corner here, and I'm going to just basically get them roughly aligned. And then I'm going to come up here to a new command up here under Edit, Transform, and Distort. And what this will let me do is adjust the corners, and I can distort this all out of whack. So basically what I want to do is align that one to this corner down here and bring this one up to this, okay, and basically distort this and basically put it into the right perspective, okay. So as you can see here, this doesn't always work, but it can kind of give us a fairly good representation of what's going on. Don't worry about the stair stepping in there right now, but I'll accept that. And when I turn off those show transform controls, you can see we put that window in, and it's roughly in the same spot as the other one. And honestly, probably no one's ever going to notice the difference in the shadows or the windows. The only thing that kind of gives it off is the fact that this window is open with that same shadow there. The other thing that gives it off is the fact that these stickers are in these windows, so we can take care of those as well. I'm going to just put that up here on this layer like this, and I'm going to come back to this cloning layer and get rid of the rest of this ladder, which is pretty much just, the Tyvek symbol on here. So I'd have to come in here and zoom up to this using the clone stamp tool, make my brush a little bit smaller, hold down the Alt key, and I'm just going to pick right up here. Now, some people might worry about the word Tyvek, but I mean, that really doesn't have anything to do with what we're doing here. So I can just go in here and just clone this out and, you know, even just clone out that Tyvek. It's easier than trying to match it back up again. So I'll just come in there like this and just match the shadow of this and reposition this over here and get that little piece out right there. Okay, so then I'll come down and do the same thing here. This time I might turn off layer 2, which is my window copy. Let's make that happen here. So I'll rename that window copy. Turn that off just to make it easier when I'm cloning. So we can see here the ladders all in the shadow over here. So I'll again hold down the Alt key up here roughly and just start cloning that out. And I don't even care about the window underneath here. I'm really just more concerned with getting that ladder out of there. So we'll just kind of do that sort of thing like that. Now, when I have transitions like this, I would probably pick right here and just go like this and try to get that out. Anything that's a straight edge like this, I try to, you know, match up that straight edge with another straight edge. It just makes things easier. So we can kind of clone that little piece out. Clone that out. So get this all out of there. Whoops. A little bit of accidental stuff there. Okay, and we'll just keep cloning that. Alright, we got the ladder out of there. The only thing left is the ladder shadow. We can get rid of that as well, so might as well make it accurate. So I'll go ahead and get the Tyvek out of there. Kind of pick right here and just go up and over. See those wrinkles that kind of repeating? That can really cause an issue there, so we can try to, you know, fix that if we can. Okay, so something like that. Turn that window back on and our ladder is gone. Let's zoom out here. Yeah, it's not looking so bad, I guess. Okay. So here's before and here's after. Okay. Before, so you can see the trucks, those things, the ladder. Okay, and after. Okay. So what else do we have in here? Yeah, it's looking pretty good, I think. The other thing, like I said, those stickers may cause somebody to notice that this is a fake. So I'm going to go in and clone those stickers out. So again, what I would do is probably clone from this pane right here up to this pane so that this black matches this black, and we'll do the same thing in these other ones. So this will take a little bit of trial and error here. I'll pick right here and I'll bring that up to about right there, and then we'll just kind of clone up. Now you can see it's not doing the cloning job, and the reason for that is because we're not, this cloning isn't up here above this window. Okay, remember it's cloning current and below. Well, this window that we're trying to copy from is above this, so it's not actually cloning it. So we could just take that cloning layer and move it above. Okay, and now you can see that happening here. So I'll go ahead and pick this transition again right here, and we'll bring that right up into there, and we'll get that taken care of. We'll just bring that out of there like that. Hold down Alt again, reposition, kind of bring that up like that, bring it over, get that right out of there like that. This time I'm going to come over and pick the edge over here to the right, line that up right there, get that out. I'm not sure where that little bit of white's coming from. I'm just going to fix that right there. There. So we'll go ahead and look at it. It looks fine. So I'm going to go ahead and save this off. I'm going to do File, Save As, and give it a name of AS, well, it would be CAD 234 underscore my name, well, it would be your name in this case, and ASGN2, and save it, and OK. So on your assignment, you're going to be asked to do a few other things here. For instance, you're going to put in a different background. You're going to clone out some stuff. You're going to put in another sign here. So let's do that. We'll put in a for sale sign on the front lawn here. So let me close out some of these other images up here. And we'll come out to Bridge, and I'm going to go to Stock Graphics. And here's our for sale sign right here. So we'll open that. All right. So what I want to do with this is put this for sale sign on the front lawn. So again, we're going to cut this for sale sign out. So I could try quick selection on this and see what I get, but I have, let's see if it's going to work. We'll go ahead and just come down through all this and get all these. Make sure we get all this stuff. I want the black frame over here. That looks pretty good. Now, this is going to be fairly small in the image, so it doesn't have to be too perfect. Also, what I'll do here is subtract out a little bit of that. So subtract that out right there. We'll subtract out this area in here. Get rid of that stuff. Okay. Get rid of that. Get rid of this stuff over here. Okay. All right. So I have a fairly good selection here. I may have to do some repair on there, but that's okay. Once I have it roughly selected, I'm going to use my Move tool, click and hold in it. Now notice the difference between my cursor when I have my cursor inside the area that is selected versus outside the area. So inside we have the scissors, outside we have the Move tool. I want to cut this out and put it into this one. So I'm going to click and hold, drag it up into here, bring it down, release it. You can see it's really, really big. We don't need it that big, so I'll turn on the transform controls. Hold down shift by picking the corner and keeping it held down. We'll just bring it down to a smaller size. All right, we'll put it like right in here, something like that. Off to the side maybe. Could even put it, well, we'll put it right here, I guess. All right. So we'll put it in right there, and we'll zoom up to it and clean up first off some of these shrubs here and get the little black metal pieces that stick into the ground to come down a little bit further. So let's zoom up to that. Okay, and again, this time we're gonna clone on this layer. I don't want to clone everything below it, so we're going to use the clone stamp tool again. This time I actually do want hard edges because I want a nice hard edge between these things. So I'll go ahead and put that in, and I'm going to hold down the Alt key, or actually I want to change my sample to the current layer. Hold down the Alt key and pick like right here, and just come over here and just paint that in like this. So I'll hold down the Alt key again and just kind of paint that in like that. Hold down the Alt key on that red area. Just kind of paint that in as well. Hold down the Alt key on that red. Make my brush a little bit smaller. Paint that stuff out. Hold down Alt on there. Kind of get that out of there. Now I know this has a rounded corner, but I'm not going to worry about that on this because it's so small it's not going to show up. So we're just kind of just get it in there like that. Okay, close enough. All right. And then I want to clone this down a little bit, so I'll hold down the Alt key and pick like right here and line that up and just kind of bring that down. So when you get to the end, you can't clone anymore. Just reposition and redo that source. So we'll go ahead and line that back up. Drag that down. All right, close enough. And then we'll just do it to the other side. So I'll go ahead and pick like right here. And I'll come over here and pick right here. We'll drag that up. I'll have to get rid of some of that white there, but that's okay. So we'll come in here and pick that again. Drag this down all the way to the ground. Okay, so we're back here and we have the for sale by owner in here. The last part of this would be to just anchor this to our image. One of the problems sometimes is the fact that things don't seem to blend correctly into an image. And in this case here, it's not a really huge issue, but one thing that will come up is shadows. On this particular image here, we can see that the sun is kind of up to the left. It's really high, and it's creating a pretty steep shadow here. You can see the longer shadow is on the eave here versus the shorter shadow on the right. So in this case here, this for sale sign would have a little bit, you can see here how this wood is sticking out and has the shadows on the ground here. So this would have a little bit of a shadow on the ground as well in order for this to show up correctly. So, because right now it just kind of looks like it's just kind of, doesn't look like it's really belongs there. So one of the things that we can do here is put a quick shadow on the ground here. There's a number of different ways to do that. The easiest way really is to actually duplicate this layer. So we're going to just take this layer here and duplicate it. So we'll say duplicate layer. And this is going to be the sign. It's very important to name your layers. So this is going to be sign shadow. Okay, so I'm going to take this image here and I'm going to create it into a shadow by coming up here to image, adjustments, and we're going to come down here to threshold. And what this will do is convert this into a black and white image, and then I'll take the slider and move it all the way over to the right, and it will make everything black. And I'll hit OK. So this basically makes a silhouette out of whatever image that you have. And then we can take, under Edit, our Transform tool, the Distort tool, like we did with the window, and just basically distort that so it's kind of sitting down on the ground. So picking our grips, we'll just kind of bring this down on the ground, and I just think the shadow is just going to kind of be to the back and to the right just a little bit. So it's going to be kind of more like this down on the ground, something like that. All right. And I'll accept that. Okay. Obviously the shadow is behind the sign, so we'll bring it down behind it. The other thing going on with it is it's too black, and this one here isn't kind of touching the other one, so I may have to go back into transform, distort again, and just kind of move that a little bit. See if that looks okay. Yeah, something like that. And then I'll just lower the opacity for this layer. Now up here in layers we have opacity. This opacity is at 100% right now. If we lower it down to about 50, you can see how it turns into this gray and it lets everything else kind of show through. Maybe a little bit higher. So something about like that probably is good. Okay, so now we've grounded the sign to the ground and it looks correct. The very last thing here is we'll add some text in here. My type is really small, so let's make it huge. All right, and I'm going to just use a simple font like Arial or any of these fonts really. Doesn't really matter. So we'll try Arial Bold, and I'll put it in right here. I'm going to put in my name. Okay, I want the text to be black. And I'm going to put in my name. Okay, why isn't my name showing up? My name's not showing up because layer 2, this text layer, is behind the sign. Okay, so I'm going to cancel the text for a second and get on the sign layer. And when I click this time, text should be on top. So I'm going to just type in my name here. Oh, and it went back to white. That's okay. We'll fix that. 9744821. Okay. So we'll take this whole thing and size it down by using the grips here. Get it roughly in the right location, then we'll zoom up to it and fix it up. So I'm going to double click on the capital T. We'll change the color to black. Okay. I'm going to center it, center justify it, and bring it over. And again, it needs to be a little bit smaller. So we'll click and drag that up a little bit, drag that in a little bit, and I'll rotate this just a little bit, like that, and I think we're good. We'll zoom out, and we're done. So we'll go ahead and do a file and save, and should be complete with this assignment number 2.